Hey everyone, it's BB Miniatures here, and in this video, I'll be going through a post-project review of the recently released Hibu Khan of the White Scars set in the Horus Heresy that was kindly sent to me by the team at Warhammer Community. So, as the title suggests, this is the third and final part of Hibu Khan. In this video, I'll be presenting a post-project analysis about the creative, working through repainting of his face, how to handle trichary elements, self-critiquing yourself between paint sessions, and just minor touches to close in the closing stages of bringing the model to its final presentation. You know, the little nitty-gritty stuff that, doesn't always get to see camera. Of course, if you haven't already, just a few little clicks goes a long way for my channel. From liking the video, subscribing if you haven't already, but also my favorite is to hear back from you in the comments below, and sharing this video with a friend. And if you want to learn more about how I paint, why not consider joining me on Patreon, where I have over 150 hours of painting tutorials with a wide variety of techniques and subjects to help you bring your painting level up to the next, so you can express yourself in more detail with your miniatures. Okay, that's my short plug. Now let's get stuck into it. Starting with the creative choices, for those who aren't familiar with my take on the White Scars, I've gone through, a few iterations of the scheme in both the modeling setting, the model setting with an ambitious idea of the whole army presented with a sunrise backdrop, to various degrees of green ivory armor, which is where, I kind of settled in now, along with overarching inspiration from ancient China with loose references to the Third Kingdoms period, with the later being a strong base that I found a personal connection with myself being half Chinese. This ongoing army project has found a way to inspire me to read more about my culture actually and get closer to my heritage stemming from my mother's side. And that is honestly a pretty cool idea since, taking a science fiction world can inspire yourself to go beyond outside the hobby and start bringing pieces of your heritage back into it. For those who are looking to bring a fresh take on your miniatures or armies, there's a real advantage to looking outside the frame of Warhammer universe and to bring something back in to help tell your own stories. Even with over 50 plus novels and book supplements, it just in the heresy alone, not given everything else in Warhammer, it really pales in comparison to what could be written about any of the legions of the numeral cultural details that are presented there. The universe is vast, and there's just so much detail in which you can fit in nicely alongside the actual canon lore that you can help bring to life and set your collection apart from everyone else's. I've always been one to promote myself with self-expression and doing your best to, create something unique so that we can have an even wider range of creative possibilities out there. There's nothing wrong with copying elements that you see, but it's with the mash up the ideas and injecting yourself into your own projects that's really going to be pushing the hobby forward into new exciting horizons for yourself, your close gaming community, and, the wider range of the internet. For Hibu Khan, though, I wanted to present a more dramatic and poetic expression of the Legion throughout his character, bringing to the canvas a lot more color with the aid of numerous paintings and illustrations of Guan Yu, the Chinese god of war, and remembered as one of the 5 greatest military men in ancient China. The red, yellow, and green are the main dominant colors of this scheme, and I think it'd actually greatly serve Hibu Khan well. This color scheme is a great example of bringing something outside of inspiration into the heresy setting that's, pretty direct, and even more, you could also grab the exact color matching if you'd like I've done in the past. For him though, I didn't take colors from Photoshop, and I didn't do any color picking or swatches in preparation for the painting. I was just focused on the vibe that the colors gave, as to me that was enough. Where it comes to his face is where both excitement and stress come into play, as my first attempt, didn't spark much joy at all. The exciting part was the actual concept and where I made a creative room to deviate from just being inspired by Guan Yu. By slicing in some Japanese Kabuki theater into the mix, the skull face paint he was originally illustrated with on the cover of Grey Talon, written by Chris Wright, never really did it for me much as a character. I needed something more culturally unique and would fit my image of what would find on the world of Trigoris. Well, what quickly came to mind, of course, is like the striking costumes and like especially that face paint that the Kabuki theater actors wear. It perfectly complements the White Scar scheme, I find, with striking patterns of red across a white base, as well as with a clear separation of what the rest, really separating itself from the rest of the Imperium. And I think that's perfect. But painting it, well, the pattern on his face, simple ivory base of the skin is just with very gentle touches of shadow to give a little bit of contrast to the face. The pattern really has to be kept tight, and working to make it defined without a big mess wasn't easy. Through the process, I had to fight the urge to dump it and start again numerous times throughout the painting process, not just at the end. But really, I just had to tell myself that I needed to try and see it through. This is something totally new in my books of doing a complete face paint, and I'm going through the process, and I'm thinking it's going to contain some like vital lessons that I need to learn no matter how painful they look in the process of doing them. As expected, when I reached the end of the face, I knew I just had to strip it and start again. But you know what? I'm totally glad I did go through it because I learned a few things that I carried to the second attempt. As well as, what I'm saying about earlier, by diving into a project, by spending time reading, gathering inspiration and building up the passion for the project. Well, in this case, that preparation comes to help in situations like this. It would have just been easier if this was an average project that I could just drop this concept, grab the helmet, and just go with that. The helmet looks great. It was definitely sitting there, primed and, ready to go, even with ivory and all the layers of the white painted on there, kind of just in case, but also it was on my desk and, I wanted to use that helmet possibly for future work, but, staring at me when I'm when I'm thinking of stripping this thing definitely came up in a few times. But that would just be, letting go of a really cool idea for him and maybe coming back with the feeling of, selling myself out short if I took that route. So I came with a learning and, a progressive attitude, backed up with like a genuine passion for the Legion. Stripping the head and just starting again was just like, hey, right when I'm done, quick critique, let's do it again. So this time, with a strategy to firstly find a simpler pattern to copy, as well as to try a strategy where I'm going to finish the right side before moving to the left so I get a mirror image and I kind of get the understanding of what angles and what lines I need to follow. Plenty of times though, the whole sections of painting in my head was in frame, ruining it. It was pretty annoying because as much as like I was really zoned in on the second attempt, I totally forgot that I was filming and a lot of it got covered from my head. And sometimes that's just, the way things go. And sometimes even as much as I want to share and teach this process, a part of that will come when maybe I'm a little bit more ready to show you a clear, more presentation of the face painting in its entirety. Because, as much as I like to boast that, hey, it's done, but, it was my first time. So, you got to give it some leeway and, I'll definitely be going at it again. His face at the end where honestly, I don't think it's the strongest feature on the model that but at the same time, it's one that I'm proud of and I'm happy I took the time to go over it. I'm stoked to apply this Kabuki concept to, future models actually of the Ordu, and with more practice under my belt, I'll be able to present with you a full, undisrupted video process on a future Ordu Legionnaire. I'm looking at the golden Keshig. Wink, wink. Now with that out of the way, let me open up Photoshop. Let's get some images up of Hibu Khan and explore those tertiary elements and the other things I was describing. And we'll take it from there to give you a more insight into the rest of the process. All right, so I got Hibu Khan here open up in Photoshop. I have a few other, angles that we would be covering. But one of the first things we're going to talk about here is a little bit of like how to give yourself a self-critique, as well as, not only at the end of the project, but more importantly, throughout the entire process. And how I like to do that, I basically like to break them down into two distinct phases of a critique. And it's important to kind of like separate these two, so not as to go completely mad and, try to get a little more of a focused session when you're doing critiques. And it's always really handy. 90% of my time when I'm doing critiques, it's mostly at home when I'm away from the model. Not everyone has their own studio and goes back, but I think taking a photograph and looking at it through a different perspective is also very helpful, as well as give yourself a bit of time in between the session, your paint session and then your critique, because it kind of just lets your pretty much lets your like mind flush out all the ideas. You get away from the project for a little bit, and then when you come back for a critique and looking at and analyzing your work, you're kind of coming back with some fresh eyes, and you'll probably see things you didn't really get to notice when you're painting, because maybe you're so dialed in, and also your eyes, and you've been painting for a little while, and looking at something too familiar, or like the same thing with proofreading your work when you're typing or whatever. You mean writing out a blog, or even like if you're doing essay writing. The same idea is like you kind of need to take your mind away from it for a bit and then come back. And I find I take a few reference photos, a few shots of the work that I did of the day. Then when I travel home, have dinner, and then in the evening I open them back up, and then already I have a little bit of a fresher perspective on what I'm going to be taking a look at. And I think that's a good habit, because you might, again, you might not see things you did before, as well as you allow some ideas to kind of like marinate and then look at it with a fresh perspective. And more often than not, I've caught areas where I'm like, that looks really ugly. If you caught during, I think it's like part 1, even the gorget around his neck, originally I was painting gold, and that's a really good example of, that's a little bit too much gold. I'm going to change that later on, because, after I got home, I was looking through it. I'm like, you know what? No, that's not really working. Let's change it up. And that comes in with the two distinct phases of my critique that I'm going to go through. And the first one is like taking a look at composition. So I'm going to break it down into like looking at composition. That's mainly like looking at colors, placements, things in that category. And then the second part, which I'll do, is technical. And that goes into, really diving in and looking at the technical painting aspect of it and doing corrections there. And I like to generally separate those two things, is because if we just get straight into the technical and, trying to correct things that way from the beginning, we may end up looking at technical problems, but after doing all that work, then you go, wait, that color actually didn't really work very well. The same idea with the gorget. So I like to do the composition first to make sure, the general palette's looking good. My general shapes, and just like the overall like lighting looks okay, and then I dive into the very big specifics. Now, when taking a look at composition, this is where, stuff gets, since it's a little bit of taste driven. But one of the things I like to do at the very beginning is taking a look at your model. Now you can do this in the hand, or you can do it again with Photoshop or image processing, is actually squinting your eyes at the model. And what I mean by this is I want to look at it in a blurred state. So to give you an idea what I mean is, I'm just going to take this image and I'm just going to go filter. I'm going to go blur. I'll just go Gaussian blur. And this kind of simulates me if you were to squint like barely with your eyes open, so everything looks kind of like a blur. And I take a look at the model like this. See, we don't see any big details, but what we do see is some general color blocking. I can see, the blocking of the backpack. His face is just round with some little bit of red in there, white. We can take a look at just big ideas. You can't even see the detail in his arm, and that's the whole idea. I just want to make sure, and I want to see how the colors are interacting with each other, and then their placement, as well as the size of of the areas that we're covering, and to make sure that we have a good balance in things. And what happened, I don't have a photo, but one of the things I did when I looked at the model with him with the golden color is I didn't feel that it just had enough red, and I wanted to change that, because I'm like, it's not as strong as I thought, and needs a little bit more red, in terms of the for the white scars. And I think the red makes a more visual impact, and it kind of surrounds his head, the white head, and gives more of a nice contrast onto there, as well as when it goes red, black, white, red, boom, really powerful colors. And I was like, that's going to be a better look. Same thing when you're looking here, even throughout. The reason why, I did a two-tone cape on the inside, that really nice dark green really has a strong contrast against his leg. So you can really see the separation, because like the nice thing with a side thing with capes, especially when you get to see them from the front, capes also add a natural backdrop to the model. So without the miniature being mounted on a backdrop, some display miniatures, a cape just kind of gives a background for your model. So like a little bit of a backdrop for the rest of the model. And we want to get a little bit of a highlight there. I thought that if this was all yellow on the inside, the yellow and the white, fairly close, not enough contrast into there. So the green, of course, I'm a big fan of green as well, with like green being the base tones of my white. I thought this was a nice highlight into there. And of course, this green is a lot stronger and a lot more saturated than, what I'm using as the shadow colors for the white. So that's just to give you an idea. And going back to here, now we're looking at it sharply. So squinting at the model kind of just gives you a general feel and a balance. And if something doesn't feel right when you're looking there, maybe like there's way too much color on one side, or maybe it's way too dominant, and it it's not vibing with the feeling that you want to present on the model, that can kind of give you gives you some yellow flags to look through. So you settle that first, and then go back into the more technical parts. The technical area, of course, is just like more often than not, is just zooming in and taking a look at, if you have any missed brushes, missed slips. Those are the simple ones to look at, maybe if I have a stray brush stroke here and there. Even looking back into my work after it's done, there's like a small, there's a few small mistakes. And, given, if it's going to be like, a golden demon model, or like, you're going to be entering in a competition, this is the big one that you really got to comb over. So looking at technicality faults, or, either technical faults or just technical highlights, where you're placing your highlights and placing your shadows. So like even there's a little brush slip there. Ooh, not a huge big deal. You can barely see it through there. That's a little nick. That's okay. just little things like that. Nothing huge, but, something to comb over your things through. And, depending, how much you really want to analyze it, you can really dive in there and nitpick at every single little thing. Even like looking into here, quickly, a few things I didn't do, which I, technically I should be doing is like, for instance, the golden butt end of the sword here, there should actually be, I should actually put a little reflection here and another reflection there, just to give that a little more of a spherical round out. But, that's okay. But yeah, but like going through the, combing through the entire model, I'm just going through here and just looking through little faults and little areas to, little mistakes in here. Oh, here's another mistake. See, I'm just showing you, I'm not perfect. There's always going to be a few little slips here and there, especially for, this model. I wasn't planning to, enter it in any kind of competition. I just wanted to paint a nice, like, higher end tabletop miniature that I want to game with in the future. So, some things I will just let slide a little bit. Maybe I'll, I can always go back and just put a dot of black in when I'm, when I got a spare moment at the desk. But, just for now, that's what it's going to be like. And yeah, just taking a little bit of extra time, especially with like a project you're really, really proud of, you're really, really hyped on, it's always worth to take that extra time. As well as I really encourage you, when you can, is to, find a friend or, members on the Discord. That's where that, roast me section is, or like just asking for feedback. It's sometimes really critical, to have another person's eye to take a look at your work. Yeah, it's, it can be, it can feel a little bit intimidating, or, a very easy reaction is to like completely dismiss it. People thinking that, or you might get that feeling that, people are insulting your work, but it's a good skill to have, and it's a good skill to exercise, to like, ask a friend or ask someone on the group, hey, help me out. I just need your eyes. I need your eyes to help see some mistakes. Is because, again, as much as, like I said before, trying to, after your session's done, try to give yourself some time, a few hours, even a day or two, to kind of like your eyes relax, so that you can see these mistakes better. But even better is getting a friend or two to take a look at your work, and because they'll almost guarantee they'll see things that you haven't seen. So the more that you can do that, I think the better you're off. And even like a really good example is my friend Alex, that he won the Slayer sword last year with his the vampire, and that model, within our painting group, he went through a lot of revisions, and a lot of times he was showing us his work and just asking very openly, hey, where do you guys see mistakes? Point them out to me, please. I need your hand. And we are more than happy to like point out a lot of little mistakes and little bits of critique here and there, all to make the work better. So even to tell you, even the best of the best painters out there are not just in their lab solo, not talking to anyone, not asking for feedback for anyone. It's totally okay, and it's totally good practice to reach out to your peers and ask for that stuff, because they'll see things. Hopefully they'll see things that you don't, and we can make an outstanding model. And it's all about, at the end of the day, if you're really about creating the best piece of work, don't be afraid to do it, because it's in service of the work. Kind of put your ego aside and get it done, and find out what needs to be done in order to make a good piece. The second part, of course, I had some questions on the Discord from you guys is how do you guys deal with like tertiary elements? So what I mean by tertiary elements is, well, tertiary means third, or, you know, gibbons, little details that are there to, you know, fill out the character, to, you know, be little extra pieces that'd be like, I would say for him is definitely along his belt. He's got like little tassels here and there. You just little things mostly on the belt, and for him, the holster, maybe his fur. You know, I didn't really consider that as a primary element, even this backpack thing. So even you take a look very closely, you know, I didn't go like high fidelity on, you know, on this area here. You know, I really wanted the cape to be more of the feature, the blade, and then hell, even like the shoulder pads and stuff like that. I wanted these areas to be more, you know, more up front. They're more the hero elements. And even on the front here, you know, of course, the hero element is his face, his pauldrons, and then like, yeah, there. And I always like to highlight the white scars patterns and stuff like that. So those are like the, you know, the big main elements of here. Now, to make tertiary elements and not stress out about them, the two main things is I like to use is reduce the saturation of these elements. So don't make them very, very bright. Don't make them bright and strong like I did with, you know, the red and the green. Don't do that. Make them desaturated. And that's like forms of like mud and gray. So in instance for him, it was, you know, the tassels are just kind of black. They're like, I think I used like AK rubber black, and then I was just adding in like sunny skin tone or a peach color just to get a bit of a highlight. So not a lot of color used there. And also I don't highlight very brightly. So I'm not going to bring any kind of like max highlight brightness up to like, you know, our shine points here or there, or bring them, you know, close to the white armor at all. Because, you know, one of the things that draws our attention is going to be something that's bright, something with a lot of light, a lot of reflection, you know, that draws our eye. And if it's a tertiary element, such as like all the gibbons and, you know, even something like Space Marines, like power cables and such, I don't think are very important elements. You know, I don't want like, oh, check out that cable, you know. It's like, no, I'd rather check out his sword, or, you know, the emblems, his like Legion iconography and stuff like that would be a lot more important than his power cables, or, you know, and this is also a little bit on your discretion too, you know. Whatever you make very bright and very saturated is going to garnish a lot more attention than it's not. And brightness, of course, even in this case, see there's even lots of gold along his belt, but this is a combination of not just only, see how like this all these elements here are under his arm, so his arm's going to cast a natural shadow into there. So I naturally didn't highlight the gold very bright, so like it only gets a sliver of light along here just because it's shown. And if I take a look at the reference that I created in the black and white, so here it is, cutout, I can see like how this arm makes a natural shadow right there, so it makes it darker, and then a little bit of light sticks out here. And I took a little bit of liberty adding just a little bit of extra light up here just to show off the emblem just a little bit more, on because if anything, maybe his belt buckles a little bit more. And of course I brought more brightness into the jewel that's located in the center of his belt buckle. But everything else, see how like much lower this is, so it wasn't highlighted very high. You know, there's not even any form of like white or like ice yellow in there. It just remains really low. It's probably like, I think it's like Japanese uniform or British khaki into there. So keep it again very low. And then if I look at my reference here as well, you know, very low, not a lot of light getting into there just because of his arm. Now, I even took a little bit more liberty because I didn't, I didn't highlight this blade a whole lot. I didn't feel like, making that an extremely strong element, even though on my reference, look how shiny that bright that gets. I was like, oh, but, this is just a reference. It gives me a good guide to see where the light's falling, and I still used it, but in this case, I wanted the red elements to pop out a little bit more, and the green. So, you take a little bit of creative liberty in terms of like what you want to brandish. But yeah, again, like even on the side here, so I didn't choose very strong colors. Look at that. Sorry. Look at this pouch, pretty low, not very strong. I think that's just like Rhinox High, just with a little bit of like off-white just to mix in, just to give some highlights, make some texture. That's it. I could go more into this. I don't think this is the nicest element, but I also just kind of wanted to get this done because I have other things on my decks that I had to paint, mainly for clients. And, when it's a personal project, all right, get the things I want to get done. And then, I'll just leave this for now. But again, it wasn't a very important element. This angle here is not a very principal viewing angle, because when people are going to pick up the model, or when I'm going to look at the model, you're mostly going to look at this area. This view, this nice side view, I really like this long view of Hibu Khan. So that was important. And to me, that was the last angle. That's the most important there, because I really like the cape. So, you can always be selective when it comes to those areas. But yeah, and even on here, like the cabling and stuff, not a huge amount of extra work. This was just like, just putting in some black and then just putting in a few progressive highlights under there. Nothing special, nothing very bright. Just to keep it low, because again, I want the brighter areas, the brighter highlights to catch more of the attention and to create, have more focus. So making stuff generally darker on things you don't really want to emphasize is generally a fairly easy way to deal with like those tertiary elements and not to give them a lot of focus. Unless it's, if it's right next to his face or something like that, well, also in proximity, if it's right there, it's like, well, you kind of have to, give it, some more polish and some more look, because it is assisting right where our eyes are looking. But mainly, most of our tertiary elements are around the waist and on like the sides, stuff that just adds a little bit, but it's not the main focus, because most of our main focus is right up there at the top. Okay. So yeah, just make forms of any form of mud, brown, very desaturated. Keep the values low. It's also very helpful to paint. That's why I also like to paint the main elements first, because the main elements, such as like, we start off pretty much with like the shoulder pauldrons. Those are the most, those are very important areas. I push the highlights to a max, to finish those areas. But it also gives me a really good balancing point for the rest of the miniature. So if like when I painted the pauldrons, if those are like, if those are pretty much, those are finished, those are the main areas, and that's where a lot of light gets, and we get a lot of max light, especially due to being at the top end of the miniature. Painting the rest of it, I have something to balance. So, I know elements down here, for instance, should not be bigger and brighter than up here. And anytime I see that, be like, that'll give you a really good analysis, second guess yourself. You go, wait a minute. If something down here is bigger and brighter than up here, what are the reasons for it? What's really going on down here that this needs to be bigger and brighter? And and there'll be times on the model, all models are different, right? And the lighting schemes that we create can be different too. So, but again, it's just something for you to critique and, to ask yourself when you're analyzing your models and you're analyzing your paint jobs, what are the main reasons for that? And of course, so moving on from that critique, one of the other things that I wanted to touch up on for you guys that were following the tutorial, and of course, in my tutorials, I generally can't cover every single element. Some of them are just a little, they could be considered a little bit maybe boring, to watch because it's pretty standstill, or maybe I've covered them in other videos. So they're not, I'm not spending, a whole month of tutorials or more on a single model, unless, there's exceptions to it. For instance, like, the lion and horse are really large models. So there's a lot of coverage on there. But on final touches, when it comes to painting for Hibu Khan, one of the main things that I did when I would take a look around is one of my favorite things to do is just looking for like extra areas of reflection, as well as trying to harmonize some colors together. And what I mean by like harmonize is sometimes there's areas where I like to glaze in a color from an adjacent color into the area, and try to create some reflections and some interesting patterns or interesting color combinations and stuff like that within the armor. And this is the most easily noticeable with metallics. So like painting N&M, I think this is probably one of my favorite parts about doing it. And so after I did pretty much painted the model, I took a look around, and one of the things I noticed, okay, what other reflections can I add into the gold? Because we have our main, you saw the gold N&M tutorial, putting the reflections into here. Making some reflections a little more orange, especially when gold reflects upon itself, yada, yada, yada. But one of the things I like to take a look at is to grab some other colors from adjacent and try to find reflection areas and points that I can do in here. And this is a really good one, is this area right in the shoulder pauldron. So as light hits his arm here, I want to deflect the red into the shoulder pauldron. And the easiest way to do that was just to take our vermilion red, make a glaze out of it. So, 6-8 parts water. And then I glazed to the edge. So I glazed in that direction along the bottom half of the shoulder pauldron. And then at the very end, I mixed a little bit of like the dead red and some a little bit of off-white, and I just gave it an edge highlight right around here. So really bringing a little more focused red into here, and that's just to give yourself a little bit of just a little bit of reflection that's coming into here, which I think makes the shoulder pauldron just a little more tales of being reflective in the first part. So trying to find those areas in here. Same thing on the inside of this pauldron here. See, it just gets a little bit red. If I look at the color wheel, see, there's a little bit of red in there. It almost looks like hull red now. Hull red mixed with that brown with our Rhinox hide, because Rhinox hide is also reddish anyway, but here I added a little bit more red in form of the glaze. And again, oops, it's let's go back to my highlight, my marking color. So that's a little bit of reflecting red into here. And most noticeably, of course, the blade. So this red tassel, I just decided to I went a little bit bold and had a lot of red reflect. See how we can see just a little bit of, again, a glaze of red. We're just tinting the area now, just taking a glaze and tinting that area here and adding a little bit of a sharper edge highlight with a on the blade that's like more pinky, and just to give that edge in there. And I think that makes that blade look a lot more interesting as well. The other parts besides finding some reflections, actually I can show you a little bit few more. So also see how I have a little bit of red within the gold shoulder patterns. Again, just looking at the metallics, and again there's a little bit of reflections going on into there and even into here. So a little bit of red coming into the pauldrons, our gold area pauldrons here, and of course more red from the tassels. And yeah, just to give a little bit more of a touch onto there. Oh, even on top here. So yeah, the pauldrons definitely got a little more of the red into there. The second touching parts that I didn't go over in the video, of course, are the little armor chips. So not too much of like rocket science through here. This is just taken with a 00 brush and just doing very, very fine little chip marks with Rhinox hide going through. Now I think chipping, it's always easy to go overboard with chipping. It's just like, especially if some people, if you're going to take like a sponge. Now, maybe for infantry soldiers, you're doing a big tabletop army. Yeah, it probably will speed things up. But I enjoy doing them by hand. I'm getting pretty quick at them. It just takes a little bit of practice and muscle memory. But in order to get these like small little marks, I find I can just be a little more, have a little bit more control over them, especially since I did this chipping and stuff at the end. I did on the white armor, I waited till the very end of the model, is because I know it's bloody hard to keep this armor clean throughout the entire process. So instead of doing corrections midway through, and I knew I had to do more and more and more, because hey, I try to keep as clean as possible, but I know inevitably I'm going to make mistakes, especially with white scars and how unforgiving white armor really is on throughout the painting process to do it at the end. So at the very end, when everything was done, I did the brown chipping, as well as going back to my Sons of Horus green and giving some just reshadowing a few things. So especially in these armor, like I said, the armor segments that I was just showing here, giving those a quick hit, as well as what I just do for characters. What I do here is also grab a glaze. I made a glaze of the Sons of Horus green again, and just gently glazed into the shadows so you can see. And this is just to help a little bit of the airbrush work that was done prior, and yeah, it's just to help out the shadows a little bit more. You can even see the mistake here. See, I didn't kind of a too hard of a stain. I noticed that after. I'm like, oh shoot. But you know what? I'm not gonna like kill myself over that stuff. But yeah, just a little bit of, touching up a little bit of the shadows, and especially when you're glazing with the white, dilute it even more, because white will just show everything. So keep your glaze really thin, 8 parts water to 1 part paint, and really control your charge. You want very, very little charge on your brush, especially working over white, and just going over these last touch areas. So you can actually sum that up to another thing with the white is I'm really trying to find a little bit more contrast in the work at the very end, looking to see little areas. Hey, are some areas kind of being blurred out? There's not enough definition, so I start to add a little bit more definition into the model as needed. But again, taking small steps. I don't want to go too rash because especially with white armor, it's very easy to go overboard and making, if you started taking black into there, it'd be very, very strong, it'd be extreme. So to me, that's like too much for the value range that's given. Yeah, so pretty much those are like the main things that I look for when doing the last parts of the model. Again, doing the squint test, taking a look at our work, taking a look at our work through a squinting eye, as I can do here, just for you guys with the blur, taking a look at just looking at the color blocking and composition to make sure everything like is nicely spaced. I just have like little pauses and everything. I think it's almost like a bit of to me, it almost looks like a bit of a beat, like red, white, having a breathing space in between elements, especially with such a bold color scheme like I do with the white scars. And with the added green, I'm juggling a lot of strong colors. So this is like critical in order to get a pleasing balance that I like. So yeah, if you can take it into Photoshop, give it a little Gaussian blur. But also, even if you're on the painting desk while painting, or just looking at the the model at home, give it a squint so you can it's just easier to help you see these color blockings without the distractions of the technical aspect, which is our next part, by just looking for those small little mistakes, little brush strokes, little things you can change. So just to make your sessions a little more focused and not go through the pain of doing all the technical critique and then forgetting about more of the composition, then going there after you're like, oh no, I wasted all that time. But yeah, and also again, the encouragement to really try to share your work. It's always handy when you find a friend or maybe a small group of you, come into a small little, bring a little small little group of yourselves and just say, hey, we all want to get better. So all of our critique is just for the work. Once, if you build a little bit of a relationship, you can like skip the formalities. Even you can skip the formalities of saying, oh, that looks great, but we could do this. We could just go, hey, that needs help. That needs, that needs a little bit of a correction, or I think you should consider this. And, you don't have to do you can skip the politeness because you guys are already established in what your guys' mission is for your work anyway. So, but yeah, thanks again for joining me. And that's Hibu Khan in part 3. I hope, this even though this format of video is a little bit different, I hope that you guys enjoyed it and kind of like just thinking of more of like my thought process into it, and hopefully by knowing a little bit of what I'm doing behind the scenes, behind the brush, when I'm off the brush even, hopefully that I'm hoping that kind of translates to you, and maybe you could take a few of those takeaways so you can implement them into your process and to help you critique and build a better miniature for your next project or many projects to come. Thanks again for joining me, and we will see you in the next one. Happy painting.